So, hello officially everyone, and welcome to this online lunch event brought to you by Matchboard in partnership with Customer Science. This event is entitled Reinventing the Customer Experience, 3 industries, 3 approaches, and will run for around an hour and a quarter. During this time, we hope to inspire you with some new ideas and opportunities around CX transformation. We'll have 4 short, sharp presentations, roughly 10 minutes each, followed by Q&A. So think of your questions as we go along and feel free to make use of the chat functionality. Very important, we will be giving away a bottle of champagne to the person in the audience who asks the most interesting audience question, judged by our esteemed sponsor. So I think most of you know me, but if not, I'm Sharon Melamed, Managing Director of Matchboard, and I'll introduce our first speaker shortly. Before I do, let's run through some quick housekeeping. Firstly, if you have any internet issues, there's a mobile number and passcode in the calendar invite. Secondly, we are recording this event. And finally, if you could just stay on mute to avoid outside noise for speakers until the question time, when you're free to turn on your camera and ask questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Brendan Oliver Ewan, Head of Member Experience at Avant. You may know Avant is Australia's leading insurer for the medical profession. And Brendan is going to talk about building executive buy-in and cross-business support for customer experience transformation. Brendan.
Well, it's nice to see some of you again and to meet the rest of you. If you don't know what Avant is, no problems. When I joined the company 7 years ago, I had no idea what Avant does. But in fact, we're one of the driving forces behind protecting Australia at the moment with COVID. So what Avant does, we're the market leader in providing medical indemnity insurance for doctors. They have to have medical indemnity insurance to practice, and we provide that medical indemnity insurance. But we're also a multi-brand company. So we focus everything around the doctor. All of our services and all of our companies are all focused on what doctors need to live and to practice successfully. So we have our own in-house law firm. We have the indemnity insurance arm. We have a life insurance arm. We do advocacy and education a lot with the government at the moment to help advise on the COVID rollout. We do risk prevention. We have some white label products. So travel insurance for doctors, for instance, is one of our white label products. We have a health fund, we have a financial services arm, we have a lending arm. And each one of these has a slightly different relationship with our core member. So providing member experience in a multi-brand, multi-offering company is a challenge that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but was new for me coming in from wealth management at CBA. And Colin, feel free to slip over to the next slide and get the pretty picture out of the way. So the main challenge that I had a couple of years ago when I first approached this role, which some of you may be facing, is how do you establish a burning platform for a member experience strategy in an environment where your stakeholders don't necessarily recognize that we even need a member experience strategy? And there are 5 core challenges that my team and I had to overcome. The first one being doctors are at every level of Avant's hierarchy. We have doctors on our board, we have doctors who work for us, we have a lot of forum groups with our members, and we are a mutual, so we're owned by the doctors. And each doctor in a leadership position has tended to come to member experience using their own vein. So how they want to experience a service from Avant is how they believe all doctors want to experience service from Avant. They believe that we know doctors already. We don't need any professionals to come in and tell us or provide an insight into member experience. Second core issue that we faced is the fact that we're really good at member experience as it stands. The NPS, I had never seen NPS results like we had coming in from the big banks. We average between 75 and 80. And when you're getting NPS results like that, it's really hard to build a platform to say, well, it's fine now, we're doing well now, but who knows what the future's going to provide. We are a multi-brand company, and as part of that, we've latched on many different companies into our central service proposition, which has meant that we have about 8 different tech platforms that we're trying to bring together. Now, we do have a long-term plan for that, but it is 3 to 4 years in the making. So I did get a little bit of feedback. Why do you even bother with the member experience strategy or an innovation and digital strategy when our main tech roadmap doesn't actually enable tech change for a single view of member for 3 or 4 years from now? Let's just fake it till we make it. Don't worry about doing anything in that space, and let's wait for the tech change to come across the board. The fourth central issue, we have staff who are tenured around 25 to 30 years. They love the company. They provide outstanding service. In fact, too much service sometimes. And there was a prevailing view amongst the exec when trying to get support on the line that we don't need to do anything else because our staff make the difference. We don't need to empower them further or give them anything else. And members, they like to interact with our staff. So why should we try to do anything around efficiency or look at other experience propositions? And obviously, like you can all feel, COVID, we're all doing 1,000 things at once. And our main focus at the moment is to try and make sure that doctors are able to provide correct advice during COVID. So introducing an MX strategy at a time when we are so busy was a bit of a challenge. The next slide presents how we overcame the challenge internally. Some of this stuff may be just 101 for you and may think is a bit ridiculous, but as I went through the process, they kind of helped me to centralize 4 different areas that I really needed to make sure were examined and looked at. So the central one, get it kicked off right. Our CEO changed halfway through the program, which is a bit of a challenge. But luckily by that point, we'd already established what parameters are we working in, who are our key decision makers. It's the exec, it's the decision makers, it's the staff. And what are the parameters? What room do I have to play with? If I can't change the world, if I can't change the technology roadmap, how can I add on or add things to the technology roadmap? What were my dependencies versus where we as a team could fly solo? So what are the things that we could just go away and do and have the permission and leverage to do? And what was our problem statement? Getting everybody to actually recognize what the problem you're trying to solve is and what the opportunities to solve that are, and mean that you can continue to reference that as you look for sign-off. So for us, the problem is that our mature members are really happy, but our younger doctors are starting to fly away. Getting people to recognize that was the problem meant that when I went to try and provide a strategy to get that signed off, they could remember back to what was the initial problem that we were all aligned to from the beginning. I've worked in member experience for about 20 years now, and I continue to hear the member experience is fluffy, it's subjective, it's trying to make people feel good. Credibility is gained in that process if you can use all of the data and sources that you have to provide a story that's fail-proof. Now, fail-safe. That voice, that data for me comes from a combination of different areas. Members, obviously, and customers get as much data as you can to prove that there are opportunities that you need answered, not just within your own industry, but other industries, because as we know, experience is not just based on your industry, it's based on what your customers are experiencing out there on the market. So utilize the voice of the voice of customer. But then the next one is staff. Lots of our exec weren't necessarily in touch with how staff were feeling and what they would suggest with the member experience, and utilizing the voice of the people who work for the company in providing a different experience is one of the most powerful tools that we could get to move the experience strategy forward. And consultants, obviously. We had a significant moment where customer science was able to come in and provide a framework that was in perfect corporate speak that kind of said, you're here, if you want to get to here, this is what you need to do. But putting that into corporate speak through the use of consultants was vital for me in getting our strategy across the line. The third one, again, going back to that fluffy member experience, is all about making people feel good and doesn't have any real impact to the business. Being able to focus on tangible outcomes really helped shift the dial for half of our board. Now, tangible outcomes can be whatever fits for your own industry. For us, we're a risk-averse company. So a lot of the MEMX strategy was couched in terms that meant that we would be exceeding our risk appetite for the business unless we were able to X, Y, and Z for the member, not now, but in the long term. So one of our central risk requirements is losing a certain percentage of our young doctor market. We're able to say, if the signs are right, based on all the data that we've got, that risk appetite is going to be exceeded in a couple of years. So we're able to tap into the tangible risk loss. We're able to tap into the corporate strategy, able to tap into such tangible things like lifetime value, products per customer, loss of opportunity. So all of these things that actually made the exec feel we have money that can be made, or we have efficiencies that can be gained through giving some money to the strategy and making it happen in metrics that they understood and valued. And then finally, communicate. I don't think member experience is a one-person job. It takes a whole organization to band together and say, yes, we want it, we need it, this is what we need to provide, because every single interaction can be a moment of truth to member. So I have way more meetings than I as an introvert would love, but communicating at every point, iterating, reiterating, sense checking, talking to members, talking to staff, communicating often, making sure that every meeting that I've gone into, there were no surprises for the exec. They all knew what would be discussed. I knew exactly how they were going to feel going into the meeting, and it was almost just like a tick the box activity, meant that when we got to that end point, they were on board. Next slide, Colin, and I apologize, I know I'm talking very quickly, but I think questions are coming up. So what the strategy looks like is three-pronged, and that is there's a design component, an enable component, and an execute component. And putting together just a really easy picture for people who weren't into MEX was one of the key ways that we got them to attach a visual to what I was hoping to achieve. So the design piece for us is all about building out a 5 and 10-year roadmap for member experience and our digital strategy. It's about introducing ideas like human-centered design to be part of our initiatives and projects. It's about creating a series of member experience principles, which are tangible enough that every single staff member knows exactly what experience we want to provide to our members and how they can do it in their jobs. That's all in the design space, designing the future of member experience. The enable is about listening to the voice of the member better now. We know, or at least I'm a firm believer, that we're in a post-survey world. Everyone's sick to death of receiving surveys. So this piece of work is thinking, how can we listen to the voices of the member consciously, so when they know they're giving us feedback, and unconsciously. So tapping into things like voice analytics, or how often they contact us, or when they contact us, or voice biometrics, how we can get a better view of how the member is feeling throughout their entire life cycle with us fits into that enable piece. And then using that information to guide the business into what to do about it. And then finally, the execute arm of our strategy is all around getting those quick wins across the board now that I spoke to the dependencies earlier, we don't have dependencies on other areas for. So things like call waiting, I didn't need to rely on our technology team. We're doing some work on customer interfaces at the moment, or conversational interfaces, which doesn't need additional technology in their roadmap. So the execute part is all about the quick wins that go across various lines of business that will impact MX that we can just get done. Now, I've kind of given away the lead, and I know my time is running very, very short, but the strategy has been endorsed. It's the only significant strategy that's been endorsed during COVID, which is pretty exciting. When you consider that, again, our NPS is 75%. We have doctors on the board who think we provide an outstanding experience. To get 1.5 million in investment in this environment when we're at a cutting cost phase for the business was heralded by the head of our board and our CEO as a significant achievement, and one that they didn't see happening. Return on investment, customer science again was incredibly helpful in saying, if you invest 1.5 million over the next three years, conservatively, you're going to see 4.5 million back. And I actually had members of the board at that point thinking, hang on, what? I never even knew that member experience could actually make money. What's this about? So the speed to take up on our ideas, the efficiencies that can be gained through providing a good member experience, they were revelatory light bulb moments for the board. Now we have got resources that have now been devoted, and the program is kicking off into a full project. And this, in terms of our group strategy, we now have a significant pillar which has been added to the group strategy, which is member experience. And it's being sold to our staff as one of the most significant things that we're doing as a business over the next 3 to 5 years. So from a place where we had no burning platform and I was pretty much laughed out of the building the first time I suggested it, through to today where it's an endorsed, signed off strategy, it's a pretty exciting place, or it's a pretty exciting journey. And several times I thought we weren't going to make it, but just tapping into those communication points, as making it tangible points, that ability to work within the parameters that you're giving and bring people on the journey and show them the value of what a good member experience can bring not just now, but in the future, I think goes a long way to getting that strategy signed off. Time to start raving. I know there've been questions. Did you want me to answer them now, Sharon, or should I wait until the end when we've got question time?
Let's wait till the end, but definitely you've provoked a lot of questions and engagement there. So thank you, Brendan. That was really insightful. I especially love the idea around translating member experience into revenues for your board members so that they understand the benefits. But we're going to go straight to our second case study now, so we stay on track with time. Alex Pettigrew is head of marketing at Rawson Group. Alex will share his journey reinventing the customer experience at one of Australia's most successful home builders. Take it away, Alex.
Thank you very much. Just go to the first slide there, Colin. So for any of you that have children, have ever been shopping with children or ever were a child at one point in time, I'm sure you relate to my experience. If I take my two children, 9 and 7, to an ice cream shop and I say, have whatever you want, whatever you would like to have, I can guarantee we're going to be in that shop for at least 15 minutes as they and they try and decide what flavour of ice cream they want to choose. And really, it's really interesting when you watch them. They're not so much worried about what they're going to get, but they're really concerned about what they're going to go and miss out on if they do make that decision. And what that leads to is decision paralysis, where if I walk into the shop and say, do you want chocolate or vanilla? They'll make that decision and they'll walk away. And really, this is what was happening with our clients too. We are one of New South Wales' most successful home builders. We build about 1,000 homes a year. And it's interesting when you look at our customer journey and customer experience right across our business. Our customers tend to live with us for about a 3 to 3.5 year process, when they go through the decision-making process, the pre-construction phase, all the way through to building their home. What I'm going to talk about more now is really that upfront customer experience early on in our sales funnel. Building a home is an enormously complicated process, and we were not helping clients on that journey to make that decision. If you think about where people are when they start their home building journey, it's not far off as when they walk into a used car sales yard. They're concerned about getting ripped off. They've never done this before. It's their life savings, and they want to work with someone that they can trust, and they want someone to help them and guide them on that journey. However, what was happening and we saw happening was that we had so many options for clients to choose behind, because over the years, as our business had grown and now developed, our architects have designed more and more product, and we put more and more product into the marketplace under the thought that more is better. If we give these clients so much choice, there'll be an option for every client out there and we'll be helping them. But actually what we talked about, what we ended up doing was making that choice so difficult that our clients were leading to decision paralysis. Because you've got to understand, not only were they trying to compare our 316 odd designs that we had in the marketplace, they were also trying to compare us against all the other builders in the marketplace, and they were completely overwhelmed with choice. So from a client's point of view, what this meant is that it was leading to really poor customer experience, and we were seeing clients basically throw up their hands saying, this is all too hard, I don't think I want to build a house anymore, and walking away. And from us at the back end, it was leading to a complicated, unprofitable business. Every time we had a new home that we had on our range, we had to have the drawings for that, the pricing for that, and keep all that updated and that information updated. So clients were getting a poor experience, and us, it was complicating and clogging up our business and leading to an unprofitable business. So if I reflect on then what we did, we really went away and we said, let's go and look at all our designs and all our homes, not from our traditional point of view, which is from an architecture or a design point of view. Let's go and look at all our designs from a customer point of view. When I started this process and I talked to our architects, they could justify that there was a reason for every one of our designs that they had. You've got to understand this design is slightly different because of the angle of the window here, because of the way that the corridor plays into that room. But the reality is, when I started doing some customer research, consumers did not see any difference between a number of our different designs. So what we said is, right, let's start again. And what we did is we dramatically reduced our range from 316 homes to less than 50. And at this point in time, there was outcries from our sales team that we'll never be able to sell a home again because we have to offer choice. Every client's different, every site is different. But what we did is we really started saying, well, what are the types of homes that our clients want? What are the things that are the constraints about when you build a home, be it budget? We designed a range of homes at different price points, different styles. So here on the slide, you can see sort of a modern style home and a Hampton style home, and different size homes that fit into different land sizes that people had. So we really went away and reworked our entire design and realized that we could strip our 316 designs back to just 50 and still meet the most clients' needs. What this did mean, though, at times, was that we had to say no to some clients. And we took that power of no back. And this was a really interesting insight for me and for the business, that over the years, I think we had misinterpreted customer experience as saying yes and giving clients what they want by saying yes to them at all points in time. What this meant would, anytime a client would request a change to our home, we would say, yes, you can do that. Can I take that home there, but rather than having timber on the front, can I make it aluminium? Yes, you can do that. Can I make the bedroom face this way, not that way? Yes, you can do that. Can I change the orientation and put the toilet from that wall of the bathroom to the other wall of the bathroom? Yes, you can do that. And we thought we were helping clients, but the reality is when we went and analysed the changes that our clients had made, and we went and asked them after they were living in their home if they were happy with the changes that they'd made, invariably the things that they didn't like about the home were the things that they had changed. They're not architects, they're not professionals, they'd often never designed a home before. Why were we allowing them to make some of these changes? And we ended up with situations where, you know, people's toilets, they couldn't sit down on them properly because they were too close to walls. Corridors were too narrow because they tried to maximize their garage width because that was important to them, but it gave a bad livability experience. So actually we've taken back that power and we're actually saying no to a lot more changes. What that means from an operational point of view, it's much more streamlined for us because we don't make some changes. Every time we make a change, we have to redesign the home, re-engineer the home, reprice the home, and figure out how to build that type of home. But also for us, it has positioned ourselves as the experts in home building. Just as you'd never go to your car dealer when you went to buy a car and you say, look, I love that BMW, but can I just put a fifth wheel in the middle of the car? It's designed like it is by the professionals for a reason. And by taking back that power, we've actually improved our customer experience as well. So sometimes saying no and being that credible voice has actually improved our customer experience. And if I look about what some of the improvements that we have made in our business since we've reduced our range and also started saying no to clients more often and taking back some of that power, we've actually improved our conversion rates from deposit to sale. So before, with our complicated range, it was very difficult for us to price things accurately and deliver great design outcomes. And we used to have a conversion rate from deposit to sale. So when people thought they wanted to build with us to they actually would build with us, 52%. Today, that sits at 71%. So it kind of doubled or 50% increase in our conversion rates, which is great for our business. We've reduced the number of errors and timeframes have contracted by a third. So because we used to have such a large product catalog and we used to allow all these changes, it used to take us a long time, on average 6 weeks, to price any home that anyone asked us to price for them. Now we can price that home in 4 weeks because we're making less changes. So that's reduced by a third. We've been able to improve the quality of our marketing materials while reducing our spend. When we had a range of 316 homes, we had to image and provide what we call renders, like graphical images of all our homes. That meant that if it would cost $1,000 to render a photograph of a home, it cost $316,000 every time we wanted to produce better quality images of our home. Now we actually spend double the amount, $2,000 per home on our images, but with only 50 homes, we're actually able to do that for $100,000. So having less homes actually has improved the quality of our marketing while reducing our spend. And then importantly for our customers have actually reacted really strongly to this change. If you think about yourself, if you were to build a home tomorrow and you've never built a home before, you're going to walk in and you want to talk to the experts who are going to position themselves as experts and tell you when you're wrong. Actually, we wouldn't recommend that you make those changes because you're going to end up with a poor design outcome. And we've done the hard work by crafting the best homes in the marketplace for you. So please trust us that this is the best way for you to move forward. And as a result of that change, we've actually improved our NPS, not quite to the numbers that we were just hearing then from Brendan, but from 21, where we were a year and a half ago, to 47 at the moment. So customers have actually really warmed to this change, find it much easier for us to do business with us, and we're delivering a better customer experience along the way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. There's lots of questions for you as well, but we're just going to jump to a quick poll now, which I'm going to share on the screen. Hope everyone can see that, except for our co-hosts. So we're asking everyone to take a vote. How would you rate the CX maturity in your organization? And this is not your individual maturity with CX, because you're all CX leaders, but more about the organizations that you work inside. So is it more or less just talk in the organization? Are there just ad hoc efforts with some good intentions? Are you actually starting a program of work in CX? You're up and running with CX, or you absolutely own it and have nailed it? So it'd be great to see just a few more votes come in before I close the poll. I'll close the poll in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I'll just share those results, aggregated results with you. So yeah, I guess the majority of you are underway with a program of CX work. One, I won't ask who wrote that, but someone's organization is still just talking about it. And then we have 37% of people saying their organizations have good intentions, but it's still a bit ad hoc. So it looks like there's a bit of opportunity to do more there. So thank you everyone for voting. I'll just close the poll after this alert goes away. Okay. All right. So now we're going to jump to our third case study, and that is Freya Elliott, who is a consultant at the New South Wales Department of Customer Service. Over to you, Freya.
Hi, everyone. My name's Freya, and as you mentioned, I am the CX lead in a large IT program that's happening at the moment for the Department of Customer Service. So just a bit of background on the program. The one that we're working on is an ERP transformation, which is essentially all of the employee journeys. And the ERP system that they're putting in place actually goes across 6 massive government clusters. So it's a very sort of large and complex environment. At the end of the day, the system will impact around 55,000 employees. So, and the journeys that we're looking at are all the employee journeys, everything from hire to retire, procurement, revenue to bank, budgeting, and also planning across all of those 6 clusters. So I think I've probably painted a bit of a picture about how complex the environment is and how hard it is to wrap your hands around it. So kind of with the situation that I found myself in was a very small CX team. So there was me and another person on behalf of the government, and I sort of used this image as a metaphor. I felt very much like the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And every time we would go out into the open, it was just this massive expansive environment in terms of what needed to change in those employee experiences. Every time we'd lift a rock, there'd be a rattlesnake underneath it. There's people shooting at you from all directions. It really was a very large and complex environment. So if I can kind of describe the challenges, it felt a little bit like being in a sailboat as well, with the sort of some great sort of things coming upwind. So we had a very clear why for the change. The government had gone through a number of different restructures, and every time they restructured themselves, restructuring all of their employee journeys had led to incredible amounts of complexity. So some, one individual employee could be registered in a few different payroll systems, which was, turned into a nightmare when you were trying to extract data. There's a very strong desire on behalf of the New South Wales government to improve the experience, and that includes employee experiences. There's some very easy low-hanging fruit out there. It's really not hard to fix some of these things that were happening. Great direction from the top, and we had, enough budget from a project point of view to be able to go out and access consultants from the external environment, even though internally we were on our own. But on the downwind side, we had all of the very normal things that happen in large IT transformation programs. So very difficult to get engagement across 6 clusters, very technology-led projects. So, the people who are leading the program, although they understand what CX is on the surface, at the end of the day, this is about getting a technology system live, and everything is done to build it from the bottom up, basically. Very complex, I've mentioned before. And also when you're bringing in a number of different consultants, there's a real challenge with lack of consistency. So I think that sort of framed some of the challenges that we were facing. Now we used probably, reasonably well recognised customer experience solutions. So we did journey maps across all of those major journeys. We've came up with a set of personas or role archetypes, which are the people that currently use the system and how they like to use the system, as well as how they use that system in the totality of their jobs. We also did some quant research. If there's one thing that the government does do really well with research, it's ask their employees once a year how they feel about systems. So we had a bit of quant data to go on. And we did use heuristics reviews to sort of deep dive into some of these user experiences so that we could inform, some of the fixes that needed to happen. However, we still came up with these challenges. So, I think, these are good points to sort of look back and say, well, what were the major challenges? I think getting engagement right at the front in terms of research was probably one of the major challenges. So, we needed to spend a lot more time getting all of the research participants to reflect the different agencies' voices better, so that we then didn't have to go back and fill in any gaps. We had a lot of challenges actually getting consistency across mapping of all of the different journeys. So I think I mentioned before, bringing consultants in a number of different agencies, even though we had templates and we had a very clear structure, the level of insights was sort of really scattered from very high to very low level insights. And it was quite a big job to actually get that consistency across all of those journeys, even behind the scenes. The third one I'm going to talk about is almost like an obsession with sign-off. And I think this is true with a lot of organisations that are kind of making the transformation between, like a waterfall IT big transformation program and trying to sort of force human-centred design into it. We spent a lot of time, well, actually the organisation spent far too much time sort of obsessing over who had signed off on different journey maps, when at the end of the day, really the journey maps were a consolidation of research that had come from people within their organisation, and it really was very difficult and challenging for those people to actually sign them off, because they're only looking at it from their perspective. So I think up front, we probably would have spent a little bit more time making sure that transition of those documents and how we're going to embed human-centred design into this program would have been done a bit more upfront, rather than when we hit the roadblock. And the final one, which we knew right from the beginning, but I think really was a challenge for us, was, I think at the end of the day, it was easy for people within the program to pick up on the system insights and see very clearly how solutions could be brought together and innovation could happen to actually close those gaps. But when it came to the other insights, which when you're working across silos, you're bound to get, when you're working in experiences, you're bound to get things like process change, things like people and mindset change. Really, it was very hard to transition those types of insights into the right parts of the organisation to get agreement on, especially when you're working at that sort of cross-cluster level. So, you know, you had to get like all of the heads of HR together to talk about mindset shifts and strategies and all of those sorts of things. So I think those were our major challenges. But I learned a lot of things, and I've just summarised the three major ones at this stage of the process. So at the moment where, you know, at the stage where the project has been built from the bottom up, so we have a working system, but we're waiting on funding to get to the next stage. So now is a really good time to be reflective. And although I don't have a list of benefits here, I do have some key learnings. And the first one is, I think where customer experience is placed in a transformation program is very, very critical to how the outcome is absorbed. So in this project, CX started out in IT, where it was very focused on technical innovation and how do we get technology to work together to resolve customer problems. And then it transitioned to change, and that transition really shifted the focus of the team to more about continuous improvement and how do we make sure that all of our personas are able to gather that information and be able to use the system effectively. So really shifted the focus and meant that the tools that we used really needed to shift as well. So those journeys needed to have a different perspective. The second one, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, is you know, in a IT transformation project where you have a core team of one consultant and one government person is, you know, is really a very small part of it. And when a project, you know, goes on hold, or if you go into a pause phase, you really need to be able to know that that knowledge is spread throughout the different elements of the program. So my second insight is it's very critical to have a core team of people who are there, who've actually gone through the journey and can interpret the insights correctly, rather than relying on documents. And then my last one, and I think this actually was reflected in Brendan's conversation as well, is so sometimes customer experience tools, and I'm talking here particularly about journey mapping, you know, you can spend a lot of time doing, you know, journey maps, but really the proof of the pudding is in the bottom up stuff. It's in the being able to go forward quickly, fix things, and demonstrate benefits. So I think although that sort of top down is important, it needs to be done quickly and before the program starts, so that you can actually start to deliver benefits and tangible benefits along the way to actually get people on board and embracing the journey. So those were my three key insights at this point.
Fantastic, Freya. Thanks so much. And thanks for the audience questions that are coming through. We do have one final presenter, and that is Colin Smith. Colin is Director of Customer Experience Design at Customer Science, which is a consultancy specializing in CX and customer operations and all the technologies that wrap around them. I think you'll really enjoy Colin's insights, which I've had a sneak preview of, about making CX improvements stick in your business with the right organizational structures. Over to you, Colin.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, so the biggest conversation that we're having with our clients at the moment, in fact, several times a week, is all about that. How do we make the changes? How do we make these improvements sustainable? So we've had three great case studies focusing on, you know, brilliant results or that have either been achieved or in the process of being achieved. and real tangible changes being made. But really getting those to stick and embedding those is the key challenge. And I think all three of the case studies that we heard about used some form of the customer experience transformation toolkit. So Freya talked about the research with customers and bringing things to life with journeys. I know, Alex, you used journeys and personas when you were looking at the different needs of your customer base. And Brendan, you're all about designing for the future. And that transformation roadmap is probably the stage you're at now. So I don't want to dwell too much on this transformation toolkit. I will say, if anybody wants to talk about this, we always love to chat about this. But what I really wanted to talk about is, once you've started to realize some of these benefits, how do you make them stick? And from our experience, there's basically three areas you should look at. One of those is, how do you start to bring some of those resources into your organization and start to build a customer experience function, whether it's a tiny team of one plus a contractor or whether it's a much bigger beast. And we see this happening. We see this starting to happen in a lot of organizations at the moment. And generally, the scope of their activity is based around that voice of the customer piece that Brendan in particular talked about. So it's all about, how do you capture knowledge from customers? How do you capture feedback? How do you turn that into insight and then share that across your organization? And how do you start to drive tangible improvements across the organization? It's a quite clear scope emerging for these functions. But obviously, these teams are nothing without the capabilities. So capabilities is probably the next place you need to look when you think about building this within your organization. Freya mentioned one model that we particularly like, which is all about spread, sprinkle, carve. So I thought I'd build on that a little bit. And there's three approaches that we see coming through very strongly. Carve is that innovation lab or garage approach, which has been very popular, particularly in financial services recently. So I think NAB, CBA, Telstra, and many others have built this kind of real center of excellence around customer experience, and they get all of their projects to run through these teams or these garages to get the CX expertise baked into them. Sprinkle is all about intelligent use of resources and external experts. So bringing in contractors, bringing in consultants for specific projects or specific programs of work, and getting that real industry expertise up front. And then spread is the one that Freya focused on particularly, where you're rolling out those approaches such as human-centered design, such as digital first development across your organization, so that you're getting those skills in all your people. Pros and cons to both of these. Obviously, your carve model gets very high level of expertise, but it is expensive. Sprinkle is great, but you have external experts moving in and out of the organization. So how do you make that sustainable? And spread, kind of on the flip side, gives you that general level of expertise across the organization, but how do you know you're getting the latest thinking from experts who are kind of across different industries and seeing different approaches? And the answer is, it's going to be a blend of these things. I think, particularly as we're seeing Brendan do, a combination of these approaches is what's going to get you the capability. And the final trend I wanted to touch on is the emergence of the Chief Customer Officer. So we're seeing many organizations creating this role, either specifically called the Chief Customer Officer or with a similar name and similar scope. The key challenge that we're seeing with this is, yes, it's great that you're building that ownership and that accountability at the top of the organization. However, how do you ensure you get the scope of this role right to make it successful? And there's 5 different approaches that we see, all with their own advantages and drawbacks. There's the development of a dedicated customer experience function, which is great because, you know, you've got customer experience right there at the executive committee, you know, a voice at the top table. But on the downside, that's a very small kind of scope of practice. So that person or that individual is not going to have a huge budget or a huge amount of resources to get things done. It's going to end up relying on other execs. Building Chief Customer Officer into the Chief Marketing Officer role, it makes sense because you've got that kind of combination of marketing, setting the brand and setting the expectation, and then customer experience delivering it. But, you know, how do you get the buy-in to all the different functions is still the challenge. You know, if marketing struggles to have a voice at the top of the table, then putting CX in with it is not going to help that issue. So combining customer experience with sales is another option. That's great because obviously sales is very high profile. It's what people care about. But at the same time, when you've got hard revenue targets, there can be some real conflict between those different KPIs of happy customers and financial returns. In other organizations, we see this Chief Customer Officer built into operations or combined with the head of the contact center. That's great because you get the hands-on ability to make changes. You know, you're embedded with the agents who are dealing with customers day to day. But as we probably all know from contact centers, you know, there tends to be a real focus on cost, tighter budgets, and there can be a tendency to do more tactical improvements rather than think about how you might reinvent the experience. And similarly with the head of channels or the kind of head of intermediaries, it's great because you get that really in-depth knowledge of the customer from your channel partners, but at the same time, they may also turn around and say, but hey, we're the ones who know the customers better. We own the customers. You're not adding anything to this experience. So there's 5 different models there. And the success of the Chief Customer Officer is really going to depend on it's going to depend on the type of organization you are. You're going to need to look at each of those different opportunities and decide which one fits best. However, from our experience, there are 6 critical success factors for this, and they really kind of try to draw the benefits out of each of those models while mitigating some of the risks. So having the highest level CEO sponsorship and visibility for this CXO role, bringing it in when you've got a really clear strategy and vision for your customer experience, support that with clear success measures and targets. Then also kind of combined with the operations, the ability to make changes to customer facing teams and those roles is critical to making those tangible changes, and then coordinating it cross-functionally through kind of good governance and good ways of working to enable that collaboration. And finally, kind of the benefits of the marketing side, appropriately fund it so that this new function is in a position to deliver change. And that's it. That's kind of our thoughts on making this sustainable. Sharon, can I pass back to you?
Yeah, wonderful. Colin, that's really thought-provoking. I can see from the questions coming through, lots of interest. Before we just jump to those questions, I believe you have some next steps people can take if they're interested in exploring CX transformation in their business.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Just two very quick ones. Number one, reach out to us for a coffee. We love this stuff. We are always happy to chat. So, you know, please do get in touch. We'd love to talk about what's going on in your organization. If you're ready to do something really tangible, then one of the key tools we use early on is called a customer experience maturity assessment. And that's basically a tool that will very quickly and easily help you identify where you are now and where you want to be in terms of your customer experience. And that will just enable you to frame the conversation with your execs and put together a really tangible, clear roadmap.
Great. Thank you for that, Colin. And so now it's the moment you've all been waiting for, the question and answer time. And we've already got tons of questions in the chat room. So I'm going to start with those, and then with some time left over, people might like to engage directly with their camera on and unmuted. So let's jump into a question from Glenn Robinson, which was around staff credibility and how did you actually get that voice of employee across through the organization. Let me actually just bring up exactly.
That was for Brendan, that one.
That was for Brendan indeed.
Yeah.
Yep. Brendan, would you like to address that?
A very important question for Glenn first. That background, where is that? It's been driving me nuts.
That's Lighthouse Beach at Port Macquarie on the New South Wales, mid-north coast. It's a lovely spot.
I'm down here in chilly Tasmania, so that's looking very lovely for me right now when I can see snow up on Mount Wellington. So we did a couple of things. I think one of the other questions also refers to staff champions. So we do have staff champions who self-nominated to be the voice of the member from their areas and utilize their experience and their ability to talk to staff in their teams, not only within Voice of the Member forums, but also with the exec. We also did a lot of surveys, cold surveys, when we were thinking of propositions for things like member experience principles, where I brought 10% of our staff into a couple of different forums or remote and said, I'm not going to give you any lead into this. I want you to have a look at these principles and say, are these tangible enough? Can you do this in your job? Do you understand what the language is? My favorite part of doing that process was when I went to the board with the member experience principles, with the recommendations, a couple of them sat there and said, well, no, they're not tangible enough. Our staff aren't going to be able to do their jobs. Then when I was able to turn around and say, well, actually, we've done surveys with all of these staff who did cold readings of them, and 100% of them said that they were tangible and could do them in their day-to-day jobs. Utilizing that voice was actually far more powerful than me sitting in a room and saying, yeah, they're fine, they can do it, the staff can do it. So identifying champions, making them lead the change within their areas, and then utilizing their voice in forums in a consistent way and an unbiased way all the way through to the top, have really made a significant difference.
Thanks, Brendan. Just before we jump to one of the other speakers, there's a second question for you. You mentioned you all own the member experience. What tactics do you employ to get execs leading by example and also employees to ensure it was owned by all?
So with the execs, I don't know, it's a secret in our organization anyways, execs will do most things if they're if they've bought into the message, if they've bought into the outcomes that you're looking to achieve, if they get a bit of a push in the back from the CEO, and if you make it easy for them. So in presenting to the execs where we were hoping to go, we did a couple of basic things. We did a change map so that we could really easily point out this is the change that we're expecting staff to go through. We did a very, very detailed, well, actually it wasn't that detailed, it was just bossy really, communication plan saying you are communicating this at this time and we want you to appear in this forum and say this. So it gave them all the tools and the understanding that they needed to know that, yes, this is the outcome that we want to achieve, but we're also going to help you with this. We're going to give you the instructions so you don't have to do it all by yourself. Staff, I've already talked to a little bit. Our staff are incredibly vested in the member experience, but we were able to ascertain really early on that they didn't feel that they had the tools or the consistency or the idea implanted on how to provide that outstanding member experience. So we did a lot of work right back at the beginning to say, what are the opportunities you see that you need in providing a better experience? Then give us your champions. Let's work on those experiences and let's sound that back with you once we've got some ideas about how you can actually provide a better experience. Does that work for you? Is your champion representing you? Do you think you can sign into this? Do you think you can make it tangible? And most importantly, will this help you provide a better experience? So when up here you have the exec saying, do this, do this, do this. And down here, you've got the staff saying, well, we said that we wanted to do this, this, and this. So yay, it was a beautiful marrying in between with everybody on the same page saying, yes, this is the experience we want to provide. And this is how we're going to do it.
Thanks, Brendan. I'd like to jump to Alex. There are a couple of questions quite similar around how you selected the 50 out of the 316 home designs. What data did you have to make those decisions? And were you looking at particular customer profiles or personas?
Yes, thank you. So the first thing we did is we went through and looked at what we'd sold over the last 5 years. And like most of the businesses, 80% of what we sold came from 20% of our range. So it was quite easy to start by just culling things that we just never had sold before. Then what we did is we went and started looking at what is the start point for most people's building journey. And 95% of the time they start with a block of land in mind. So we actually built out build up our portfolio of products based on what we call key battlegrounds of block sizes. So I'd encourage you to think about what are those key battlegrounds that you want to fight in to win in your business. For us, it was fighting in different lot development sizes and making sure that we felt we had the best designs for each of the most common design block elements. And then what we did is we said, right, it's very important that we win in a 12-metre frontage block of land. What are the three most powerful designs that we can have in the marketplace that would cater for our personas? So I think Colin mentioned it. We had gone through an exercise with customer science around doing a customer journey mapping and then identifying our key personas. So we, in essence, had a key battleground and then said, right, we need the best product in the marketplace for, in our world, investors, first home families or larger families, and making sure we had the right portfolio of products there to suit their needs.
Okay. Also, Alex, for you, a question from Hannah Robinson, no relation to Glenn, I don't think. Do you find that hearing no stops consumers from building with you, or do they actually appreciate the feedback?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In our industry, most people will say yes to anything just to secure the sale. So we actually found from twofold. One is we wouldn't actually say no. What we'd say is we don't recommend you should make that change because we have an alternative option for you. So we've already thought about the design, and this is why we don't recommend you make those changes. However, for some clients, they do want to make customization and personalization to their home. So we actually set up a whole new arm of our business, knowing that we were going to say no to the majority of change that clients would want to make with our sales consultants, is that we developed a new arm of our business, which was a bespoke architectural service inside our business. So for those clients that wanted to really make changes or personalize their home, that's okay, they could do that, but you wouldn't be talking with a salesperson. In our industry, most of the people that are actually making the changes that clients request are not qualified architects or draftspeople, they're salespeople, and they'll design whatever they have to design to get the sale over the line. So we'll say no, our salespeople will no longer become designers, but we created a whole new arm of our business. For you, if you said, you know what, personalization of design is still really, really important for me, no problem. Come over to our tailored part of our business, but you have to be aware if you come into that part of our business, it's going to take longer to start building your home and it's going to be more expensive. And so what we were able to do is say not no, but really define what is the most important experience for a customer. If they're driven by speed and price, don't make any changes. However, if you are destined to get exactly the home that you want in your own personal way, and price isn't a barrier, and you're willing for that to take a little bit longer for you, then please come over to our other experience over here. So by being very clear on what the drivers of customer were and what the drivers of customer experience were, we were able to make sure we put them in the right portfolio of our business.
Great, thank you. I'd like to move to Freya, and this is from Ian Stokol, who works for local government, so I guess he's entitled to ask this. How do you manage the tendency in government to cling to the old ways of inertia, slow decision-making, addiction to quick wins done in the wrong way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard question for me to answer, but, you know, I think in essence, this program was a transformative program, and it's a large investment with a future-facing opportunity. So I think that underlying tendency was more towards transformation than you might get in a smaller organisation with less budget. But in saying that, Ian, the program is on hold at the moment while the decisions are being made. So I feel like maybe I can't answer that question right at this very given point.
Okay, no problem at all. That was a tough one to answer. So Sam has a question. How do executive CXs, I like that label, define between improvement versus innovation programs, given innovation is often bantered around interchangeably with improvement? So often I hear innovation, however, when you lift the hood, it's operational rigor, improvement, or tweaking at the edges. How do you define this? What's the thinking from the group? So I'm not sure, Colin, if you would like to have a crack at that one.
I will have a crude hack at it, but I might hand over to Brendan afterwards because he is actually head of member experience and innovation. So I'll have a hack at it, then I might hand to you, Brendan, if that's all right. Yeah, look, I think from my point of view, there's really good tools out there for doing both these things. So whenever we're looking at customer experience transformation, and we're looking to, you know, we've done all the groundwork, we've understood the customers, we've got our personas, we've understood the current journey and the current experience. We'd always take kind of a two-pronged approach. So the first would be kind of down in the trenches with the frontline staff and customers, saying, right, okay, here are these pain points that have emerged. What could we do differently? You know, what are the things that you've been crying out for 2-3 years to get done, so that we can just sort these out quickly? But then we'd also kind of take a different group of customers and maybe, you know, a cross section of the business, and we'd work with them and say, let's just put all of these pain points in the current experience aside, and let's say, you know, what could this experience be? What, you know, based on everything we've come to understand about customers, what potentially could this look like, and how could we do this radically differently? And we might, you know, pull in case studies from Google and Harley Davidson and things like this, and say, you know, oh, I don't know, we work with the utilities a lot, and we say, what would you have to do to be so beloved by your customers that they would get a, you know, Sydney Water tattoo in the same way as they get a Harley Davidson tattoo? You know, what would drive that level of loyalty? So there's loads of, you know, cool tools and approaches out there, which I would call innovation. And I'd always say, as part of the kind of CX transformation piece, you do the tangibles down on the ground, and then you get the big ideas out as well.
Okay, Brendan, did you want to comment as well?
Well, it's a very pertinent question for our team, because I work in the member experience and operations division, and we grappled a lot with exactly that question and spent a lot of time defining or looking into the definition of 3 different terms. One being CI, continuous improvement, second being initiatives, and the third being projects and innovation. So that we actually did feel that there was an important distinction and an important need to get the terminology right, because resourcing is often attached to function. So for Avant, regarding the continuous improvement, we have a business systems team now, and their entire job is looking at our systems and looking at our processes and continually improving on the base that's already been built upon. So resourcing and funding is attached to continuous improvement. Then we have an initiatives and a project team, and the difference between initiatives and projects isn't great. It's really determined by how many stakeholders there are, what your dependencies are, what the funding allocated is, and how long the project is going to be. But there is a different funding and a resourcing team that's all about initiatives and projects, which is building something new, building something for the future. And it tends to, I mean, we do throw the word innovation around, and I even rebelled a little bit against it being in my title, but the way we see innovation is new, building for the future. So for us, it was really important to get alignment between what the terms actually are, because that then untapped or got us to tap into funding, got us to tap into staffing, resourcing, as well as the skill set that is around improving systems versus creating something new.
Thanks, Brendan. While we've got you, there was a question for you from Rich Rose at Fairfax Media. How did using human-centered design tools go down with everyone? I've used them a lot, and it can take some work to get some of the more traditional thinking individuals on board.
Yeah, look, I love this question, and I'm sure that there are 20, 35 people who are experts in human-centered design in this chat. So everybody feel free to add to my answer. So the way that we did it, one, our CEO really tapped into human-centered design to the stage where it's put into the strategy and changed the language a little bit. Human-centered design, I think it's quite a technical term. I think just looking from a customer's perspective or looking from a member's perspective helped our staff understand it a little bit better. Back in the day when I worked at St. George Bank and we started to do some original work with this around the concierge piece of the bank, we used to actually visualize, you've got a customer sitting in the corner of the boardroom. What are they going to be saying? So it wasn't so much human-centered design. It was more looking at it for a second from that customer sitting in the corner of the room and really tapping into that tangible, what would they say? With some of our back end or back office people, they didn't think that human-centered design should be part of their day-to-day. And the way that we got around that was actually by utilizing, again, staff champions to have a think. If you're looking at things from the outside in, how would you go about your day-to-day processes doing it? We introduced a really, really easy model that everybody can do. And I don't know if you've all tapped into the theory like the double diamond, which is a simple model for human-centered design. We used that. We incorporated some really easy case studies across just about every role. And again, most of you are probably aware of the door role play where, if you've designed a door well, you don't need to push or pull based on the lever. If it's designed really well, all you can do is push or pull based on the way that it's designed. So we set up some really, really easy models so they can see what it actually meant. We set up a really easy system or process for them to do it. We encourage a champion from each team to think about some examples from their own day-to-day and their own work life around how to do human-centered design. We've got the CEO to sign off on that. And then the final step, which was actually the most challenging, is we insisted and got in a human-centered design capability in every one of our initiatives and projects. So there's actually an empty space there in every initiative now to say who's doing human-centered design, regardless of the initiative or project, and to get somebody to actually fulfill that role. That was a challenge. We got our CEO to sign off on it, we got on the board to sign off on it, we put it to the strategy, but now that human-centered design piece is not just in day-to-day jobs, but also in our initiatives and projects. So yeah, it was a challenge. There was definitely a lot of, this is silly, why should we be designing from their perspective? We know better than them, but we got there.
Thanks, Brendan. We had a question in the chat room about, will you get a copy of the slide deck? And the answer is yes, you will, in a follow-up email. And thank you everyone that's giving such great feedback on the presentations. Ayelet said, absolutely astonishing presenters. So there you go, presenters, give yourself a pat on the back. Before I start reading out more questions from the chat room, is there anyone that would like to actually unmute and ask a question directly of one of the speakers today? Okay. everyone prefers the Neil. Oh, you
No, I
briefly.
don't. No, I don't. No, I'm not going to this time. No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. We have a question around what learnings have you got about things that did not go well in your customer experience transformations? We've heard a lot about what did go well. Who would like to have a crack at that of our speakers? Anyone willing to
yeah, I think I can talk about that a little bit. I think if I was to reflect on if I had my time again and doing the journey, I think we spent a lot of time thinking about our customer, getting the customer right, getting the right range of products right for our customer. Where I think, and we did a lot of work in terms of selling that into our senior stakeholders as well. I think what I probably underestimated was the team that this impacted the most was our sales team, particularly some of our sales staff who had been used to having a wide portfolio of product to talk about for such a long period of time. The time frame it has meant to reframe that conversation, to change the way that they sell, to go to more solution-based selling off the back of this has been a lot longer than I would have thought. So in terms of what didn't go well, I think whenever you're undertaking change, the magnitude of change that some of your employees need to go through and doubling down on that, I would have taken a lot longer to do that. I feel like we've got the good work done with our customers and our research, and the theory is all strong, but that change management of putting in any change that it is designed to improve our customer experiences, if it requires your employees to change, how do you make sure you give those people the tools and the time to come on board with you? Not just the senior management, but also those frontline staff that need to change the way that they work.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to throw in any learnings from things that have not gone right in their CX transformation? If not, I'll jump to another question from the chat room. This one's for Freya. So Ian has said, completely agree with you regarding placing the CX function in the right place in the org structure so it can succeed. I say function because CX's role is cross-functional. Where do you think it's best placed? And that's coming from another government organization.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, I mean, I don't know if there's necessarily one place that it's always best, but I think the place that you put it needs to align to the goal that you're trying to achieve by doing customer experience. So, you know, if it is an innovation goal that you wanted to build a new system for the future, then aligning it closer to the IT and product areas is a good idea. If it's a change, you know, if it is a change program, bringing people on board, getting really good engagement, then, you know, aligning it to the sort of change team's fine, and so on and so on. And I think the same also goes for the tools that you use. So I saw in the chat, there was a lot of questions around tools. And I think that's been one of my major learnings in terms of, I didn't say what didn't go well, but you know, has been a big learning for me out of this program is you need to align the tools to the goals that you're achieving as well, and really need to spend the time to think through that upfront. Because if I look at my example, we used tools because we were aligned under innovation, we were using lots of tools that were really about driving out innovation. But then when you get placed under a different area, those tools are no longer applicable to, even though they're the same names, they're not really as good for a new area. So the personas that we developed to drive innovation aren't necessarily the same personas that we would have developed had we wanted to understand how to communicate change. So I think that's probably my big learning out of this is think upfront about and align what it is that you're trying to do to the goals of what you're trying to achieve. I know it sounds obvious. Yeah.
Thanks, Freya. I apologize to the people who put more questions in the chat room that we don't have time for, but we will get back to you offline on them. But now actually is a really exciting moment because I'm going to ask Colin from Customer Science to announce the winner of the bottle of champagne for most interesting audience question. So Colin, what do you say?
I think purely on the basis of stumping Freya, who's an absolute guru on this stuff, it's going to have to be Ian.
There you go. Ian, congratulations. I'll follow up with you after the event to arrange delivery of your bubbles.
Sure, I wasn't trying to stump you, Freya. I really wanted to know the answer.
Thanks for Colin for bringing it out.
I'm just
sounds to me like Ian doesn't want it, so if you want to choose another one, then
Yeah.
There was no tie for first there. Okay.
Well, you know, if the restrictions were lifted, I'd invite you all round to have a glass. But it's been an awesome event. Thank you, Sharon.
Oh,
Freya,
no pleasure.
Brendan,
Thank you.
Colin, and who else presented?
Alex and Brendan.
Alex, yeah, no,
yeah.
Alex as well. Fantastic to hear your stories and listen to what you've done. So thank you very much. That's the real prize.
Thank you. Okay, well, that does indeed bring our event to a close. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be sending around a short survey to get your thoughts this afternoon, and the customer science team, and Colin there would be your primary contact, is available, of course, to engage further, and I'll share his contact details on the survey. Wishing everyone a wonderful, safe day ahead. Stay well and see you next time.